Have you ever found yourself agreeing to something, maybe something small, and then later you kind of questioned it? Or maybe you bought something you didn't really need and felt this weird, like, invisible pull. Well, if that sounds familiar, you're definitely not alone. And that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Yeah, it's true. Our lives are just packed with decisions, right? All day long. And to handle it all, our brains use these amazing mental shortcuts. Super efficient most of the time. They help us navigate. But here's the interesting part, the twist, really. What if those shortcuts, the very things that help us, are being, well, exploited? Subtly, but, masterfully.
That's the big question, isn't it? So this deep dive is basically your shortcut to understanding these powerful forces of influence. We're going to peel back the layers on how these compliance professionals, the really good salespeople, the clever advertisers, those charismatic leaders, even fundraisers, how they get us to say yes.
Exactly. Our mission today is to unpack some of the key principles behind persuasion. We'll look at these sort of pre-programmed tapes we all have and the specific trigger features that set them off. Often, it happens completely without us realizing it. So hopefully you'll walk away understanding influence a bit better, maybe feel a bit more clued in, less susceptible.
Okay, let's jump in. Where the research really gets interesting is this idea of the click-whir response. The concept is basically that, kind of like animals with their fixed patterns, we humans also have these preset behavioral tapes.
Right, these automatic routines. They usually work great, save us thinking time, but, and this is the key, they can be activated by very specific triggers. These trigger features, and boom, you get this automatic, almost mechanical reaction, click-whir.
Click-whir. I like that. It's instant, right? Often totally thoughtless.
Totally. And it's amazing how precise these triggers can be.
Yeah.
Take the mother turkey example. Her mothering instinct. It's massively triggered by just one sound. The cheep cheep of her chicks. Scientists found you could put a stuffed polecat, a natural enemy, near her. But if it made that cheep cheep sound, she'd treat it like her own chick.
Wow. So that one sound just overrides everything else.
Pretty much. That single trigger feature flips the switch for this complex automatic behavior. It's a perfect click-whir example.
That's incredible. And it's not just turkeys, obviously. We see this in human behavior, too, like that story from the jewelry store, where the turquoise jewelry wasn't selling at all until the price was accidentally doubled. Then it flew off the shelves.
Yeah, sounds totally backwards, right? But think about it. For those customers, probably wealthy tourists who didn't know much about turquoise, the old mental shortcut, the stereotype, expensive isn't good, well, that became the main trigger for judging quality. Price alone, that single feature, caused this huge jump in sales. It bypassed any real evaluation of the jewelry itself.
A stark reminder, really, of how easily we fall back on those shortcuts, especially when we lack solid information.
Definitely. And nature's full of exploiters using these triggers too, like certain fireflies or fish mimicking signals to trick others. The main point for us, though, is that while these automatic tapes usually help us, they do make us vulnerable. They can be used, essentially, to dupe us into playing them at the wrong moments.
Okay, so that vulnerability,
Yeah.
that brings us neatly to another huge principle, reciprocity. This one feels really deep-rooted, doesn't it? That urge, that obligation you feel when someone does you a favor, you just feel like you have to pay it back.
Oh, absolutely. It's woven into the fabric of society. We're taught from day one to follow this rule. And society has names for people who don't play along, right? Moocher, freeloader, ingrate, negative labels. But the really exploitable part, it's the obligation to receive. You might not even want the initial favor, but saying no feels rude. And once you accept, boom, you feel indebted.
Yeah, that awkwardness of refusing, I get that. And that's exactly what happened in that study with Joe and the Cokes, right?
Precisely. Joe, the researcher's assistant, just casually brings the subject a Coke during a break, totally unsolicited. Later, he asked them if they want to buy some raffle tickets. And the people who got the Coke, they bought twice as many tickets as the ones who didn't get a Coke.
Even though they never asked for the drink in the first place, Joe chose the favor, and he chose the return favor.
That's the power shift right there. Joe gives the gift, seemingly freely. The subject feels this psychological weight, this debt. It's uncomfortable. And that discomfort is often so strong, we'll agree to do a bigger favor in return, just to get rid of that nagging feeling of obligation.
Like the Hare Krishna example, too. Giving out those flowers in airports, people didn't want them, often threw them away.
Right. But the Krishnas would actually pick the discarded flowers out of the trash to reuse them. Because even that unwanted, immediately discarded gift created enough obligation for people to donate when asked. It's quite something.
So it doesn't even have to be a wanted favor. That feeling of debt is potent. It can push us to agree to more than we received, just to feel square again. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Where things get really strategic is commitment and consistency. Once we make a stand, take a position, especially if we do it actively, publicly, and maybe put some effort in, we feel this huge pressure to stick with it, to be consistent.
Yes, and it's not just about acting consistently. It's fascinating we actually start inventing new reasons to support our earlier commitment. It shores it up. Think about that beach theft study, Moriarty's study.
Oh, yeah, the beach blanket one.
Exactly. A researcher puts down a radio, asks a nearby person, "Hey, could you watch my things?" then walks off. Later, a thief comes and tries to grab the radio. The people who'd made that tiny active commitment, 19 out of 20 of them jumped up, challenged the thief, sometimes even physically stopped them, became virtual vigilantes, as the researcher put it.
And the ones who weren't asked?
Only 4 out of 20 intervened. That small initial yes completely changed their behavior. The drive for consistency kicked in hard.
Wow. That's powerful. And you see a much darker side of this in the accounts from the Chinese POW camps during the Korean War.
Right. The Chinese used what they called a lenient policy, but it was incredibly effective at getting compliance, even collaboration, from American prisoners. They didn't rely on heavy threats initially. They started small, really small, asking prisoners to make slightly critical statements about America or agree with mild anti-American sentiments, things that seemed kind of trivial.
Tiny steps.
Tiny steps. But crucially, these were active commitments, often written down. And gradually, these small acts started to change the prisoner's self-perception. They began to see themselves as someone who does this sort of thing, maybe even a collaborator. To stay consistent with that new self-image, they became more willing to do larger acts of collaboration later. It was a gradual reshaping of identity through small commitments.
It's chilling how effective that was. And this links directly to sales tactics like the low ball, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Classic lowball. A car dealer, say, offers you a fantastic price on a car, a really great deal. You get excited, you decide, yes, I'm buying this car. Maybe you agree on trade-in terms, start the paperwork, maybe even take it for a test drive overnight.
You're committed. Mentally, you've bought the car.
Exactly. And during that time, you're building up all these new reasons why this is the right car for you. You're justifying the choice. You feel good about it. Then, oops, the salesperson comes back looking apologetic. Oh, there was a mistake in the calculation, or my manager won't approve that financing deal. The original great price advantage is suddenly gone.
Focus pulled away.
Right. But what happens? Very often, the customer still buys the car at the higher price. Why? Because that initial commitment has already built its own legs. It's created its own support system of justifications. The original reason might be gone, but all the new reasons keep the commitment strong.
So those little commitments, they're not so little in their effect. They can build this whole internal structure that keeps us locked in, even when the original deal changes. Okay, moving on. Another huge influence is just what everyone else is doing. Social proof. We look around, especially when we're unsure about something, and we figure out what's right or appropriate based on what other people are doing, particularly people like us.
It's a fundamental human tendency. And usually it's a decent shortcut. If lots of people are doing something, it's often the sensible thing to do. But it's easily manipulated. That's why advertisers love to tell you a product is the fastest growing or largest selling. They're not proving it's good, just that other people think it is.
Right. It implies popularity, which implies quality, without actually showing it, like canned laughter on TV shows.
Exactly. Canned laughter. Studies show it makes audiences rate jokes as funnier, even if they know the laughter isn't real. Or those person on the street testimonials in ads, often totally staged. It's manufactured social proof.
But sometimes the reliance on what others are doing or not doing has really serious consequences, like the Catherine Genovese case back in the 60s. That's still shocking.
It is. 38 ordinary people witnessed her being attacked and murdered over a period of more than half an hour. It was loud, drawn out, yet nobody called the police until it was far too late.
Why? How could that happen?
Well, researchers Latane and Darley came up with a compelling explanation. They argued that paradoxically, no one had helped precisely because there were so many observers. Two key factors were at play. First, diffusion of responsibility. With so many people watching, everyone thinks someone else must have called the police or someone else will intervene. The personal responsibility gets spread so thin it evaporates.
Okay, that makes sense. And the second?
Pluralistic ignorance. This is really interesting. In ambiguous situations, like maybe hearing shouts late at night, we look to others to see how they're reacting. If everyone else looks calm or seems to be ignoring it, we assume it must not be an emergency. So everyone sees everyone else doing nothing, assumes nothing is wrong, and therefore nobody does anything. The group collectively defines the situation as a non-emergency, even when it is.
Wow, so safety in numbers can actually be dangerous in an emergency.
Tragically, yes. And you see this principle amplified in really extreme group situations. Think about the Jonestown mass suicide.
Yeah, that was horrifying.
Reverend Jim Jones moved his followers to this isolated jungle settlement in Guyana. Totally unfamiliar environment, strange customs, cut off from the outside world. This created massive uncertainty. And in that state of profound uncertainty, people become incredibly reliant on social proof. They look to those around them for cues on how to behave. So when Jones called for this revolutionary act of suicide, the sight of the first few people complying, combined with the extreme uncertainty and peer pressure, it created this horrifying cascade of mindless compliance. People followed the group, even to their deaths.
It's just a terrifying example of how powerful that collective influence can be when individual judgment breaks down.
It really is. And it highlights the danger. While following the crowd is often efficient, sometimes the crowd is mistaken. And that's when social proof becomes a liability, especially if someone is deliberately manipulating the signals, creating fraudulent proof.
Okay, so be wary of the crowd, especially when things feel uncertain or maybe a bit off. Let's switch to something that feels a bit warmer but is just as powerful. Liking. It's simple, really. We're just much more likely to say yes to people we know and like.
Seems obvious, right? But the factors that make us like someone are fascinating and often exploited. Things like, well, physical attractiveness, attractive people tend to get more favorable treatment. Compliments work wonders. Familiarity, just repeated contact, can increase liking. And crucially, perceived cooperation, feeling like you're on the same team.
Tell me about Joe Girard, the world's greatest car salesman. How did he use liking?
Joe Girard was legendary. His secret weapon wasn't just deals, it was making customers like him. His most famous tactic: he sent monthly greeting cards to his massive list of former customers, over 13,000 of them, and the message inside.
Or was it a discount, a special offer?
Nope, just 3 words. I like you.
Yep.
That's it, plus his name.
Seriously. I like you, that's all.
That was the core message. As he put it, he was just telling them he liked them. And apparently it worked phenomenally well. It highlights a simple truth. We are, as the research suggests, phenomenal suckers for flattery. Even if we suspect it's manipulative, we tend to believe praise and like the person giving it.
Huh. Okay, that's simpler than I expected. And what about things like the bad cop, good cop routine that uses liking too, right?
Absolutely. Classic technique. The bad cop is hostile, threatening. Then the good cop steps in, seems reasonable, maybe offers the suspect a coffee, pretends to argue with the bad cop on their behalf. The good cop creates this feeling of rapport, of being on the suspect's side, working toward a common goal, getting out of the interrogation. That builds liking and trust, making the suspect much more likely to confess to the nice guy.
So they manufacture that sense of cooperation.
Precisely. Compliance pros work hard to establish that we and they are working for the same goals. If they can make you like them, you let your guard down. You're more compliant. It's a powerful disarming tactic. Be aware if you suddenly find yourself liking someone trying to sell you something more than seems reasonable.
Good point. Okay, next up, authority. This one carries a lot of weight, literally and figuratively. We have this deep-seated tendency, often totally automatic, like lip or to just obey authority figures. We often don't even think critically about it.
It's deeply ingrained, probably because it's usually adaptive. Authorities, doctors, judges, experts often do know more than we do. Deferring to them is usually a sensible shortcut. But the classic and frankly disturbing demonstration is Stanley Milgram's obedience experiments from the 1960s.
The shock experiments, yeah, those are hard to forget.
Right. Ordinary people, recruited through newspaper ads, were told to administer increasingly strong electric shocks to another person, an actor thankfully, whenever they made a mistake on a learning task. The person getting shock would scream, plead, complain of a heart condition. Yet when the experimenter, the authority figure in the lab coat, calmly said, "Please continue," or "The experiment requires that you continue," a staggering number of participants obeyed. They went all the way up to the maximum potentially lethal voltage.
Just because the person in charge told them to, it's chilling.
It really is. And it's not just in labs. Think about hospitals. There's research showing a significant daily error rate in patient medication. And a big part of it is attributed to mindless deference to the doctor's authority. Nurses who might actually know a prescription is wrong, like the famous, almost comical case of ordering eardrops for a patient's rectum because the instruction read, place in our ear, might not question the doctor because, well, he's the doctor.
So the authority overrides their own knowledge or common sense.
Often, yes. It's like once a legitimate authority has given an order, subordinates stop thinking and start reacting. Even just the symbols of authority, titles, uniforms, fancy suits, can trigger this automatic deference. Con artists know this well. Using a uniform, like posing as a bank examiner or security guard, can induce almost mesmerized compliance in victims.
So the key is that authority works strongly but also unexpectedly. We don't realize how much it affects us.
Exactly. We underestimate its power. So it's crucial to ask, is this authority figure truly an expert in this specific situation? And what might they gain from my compliance? Questioning the legitimacy and relevance of the authority is key.
Okay, good advice. Finally, let's talk about scarcity. That feeling that if something is rare or limited or forbidden, it must be more valuable. The allure of what we can't easily have.
Right. Opportunities just seem better when they're less available. This comes from a couple of places. One is that shortcut again. We assume things that are hard to get are usually better quality, difficult to possess good. The other, maybe more powerful driver is psychological reactance.
Reactance. What's that exactly?
It's our tendency to react against threats to our freedoms. When something limits our choices or tells us we can't have something, our desire for it often increases dramatically. We want to reassert our freedom by getting the forbidden item.
Like a kid wanting the toy they're told not to touch.
Exactly. That's the terrible twos, studied perfectly. Toddlers reached much faster for a toy placed behind a barrier they couldn't easily get past, compared to an identical toy right out in the open. The restriction itself made the toy more desirable. It's classic reactance.
And you see this with censorship too, right? Trying to ban a book or a movie often just makes people want to see it more.
Absolutely. Research confirms it. Tell people they can't access certain information, and their desire to get it increases, and they also tend to believe that information more. It backfires. Juries instructed to disregard inadmissible evidence often end up being more influenced by it because it feels scarce and forbidden.
It's the Romeo and Juliet effect, too. Parental opposition can actually fuel a romance.
Precisely. Interference creates scarcity and reactance, making the forbidden relationship seem even more precious and worth fighting for. Salespeople use this constantly limited time offer, only one left in stock, exclusive deal. They're manufacturing scarcity to trigger that desire.
But here's the really critical insight, the one from that cookie study you mentioned earlier.
Ah, yes, the cookie study. Crucial finding. Participants were given cookies to rate. Some got cookies from a jar that was nearly full, abundant, others from a jar with only 2 cookies left, scarce. The results. People rated the scarce cookies as significantly more desirable. They wanted them more, said they'd pay more.
Okay, scarcity increased desire, but what about the taste?
That's the kicker. They did not rate the scarce cookies as tasting any better than the abundant ones. Not at all. So scarcity makes us want things more, but it doesn't actually improve the experience of them.
That is a huge distinction. The joy is not in experiencing a scarce commodity, but in possessing it.
Exactly. That realization is key. When you feel that rush of desire because something is scarce, pause. Ask yourself, do I want this for its actual quality, its use, the enjoyment it will bring, or do I just want it because it's hard to get? Separating the desire from the actual value is vital.
Wow. Okay, we've covered a ton of ground today. From those automatic click word responses and reciprocity, through commitment, social proof, liking, authority, all the way to scarcity. These 7 principles are incredibly powerful forces shaping our decisions, often without us noticing. And like you said, they're not inherently bad. They're shortcuts that usually serve us well. The danger is when they get hijacked.
Right. And the best defense isn't trying to shut these principles down entirely. That's probably impossible, maybe not even desirable. They are efficient. The key is awareness. It's about recognizing when you might be reacting automatically due to one of these triggers being exploited. It's about noticing when undue influence has been produced.
So practical strategies. For liking, if you suddenly feel you like this salesperson way more than you logically should, pause. Mentally separate the person from the deal they're offering. Evaluate the offer on its own merits.
Exactly. For scarcity, when you feel that frantic urge because time is running out or it's the last one, remember the cookies. Ask, is this thing actually better? Or do I just want it because it's scarce? Is it about possession or experience?
And for authority, don't just blindly accept. Ask, is this person really an expert in this specific area, not just generally smart, but knowledgeable about this? And importantly, how might they benefit if I comply? What are their interests here?
Crucial questions. And with social proof, be actively skeptical of manufactured signals, that canned laughter, the suspiciously perfect testimonials, the claim that everyone is doing it. The source material actually encourages a pretty strong response to deliberate deception here.
Yeah.
Call it out, boycott, complain. Don't let manipulators get away with using fake social proof against you.
Right? Push back against the fakes. That feels empowering. So here's a final thought to leave you with. We live in this age of constant information, endless choices, right? Decision overload is real. In that kind of environment, how can you consciously use these shortcuts, these principles, for your own efficiency? Because they're efficient without becoming, a puppet pulled by someone else's strings. What steps can you take starting today to make sure your decisions, your yeses, are truly your own and not just that click or response to some cleverly deployed tactic? Something to think about.